Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 188, Success in Year One with Reed Bailey. And I just snapped my pen. Reed, how are you?
I'm great, Kyle. How are you?
Great. You're a teacher in Arizona at Cienega High School in the
Yes.
Tucson area.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So you've had some experience in being first year teacher, not only first year teacher, but first year at school a number of times.
Definitely.
Um, so this is a great topic. I mean, this episode's coming out at the beginning of school year. So there's a lot of people listening who are in their first year of a job, and a lot of people who are listening who are in their first year of teaching period, and we want to make sure we speak to them. So what's the message you want to give them?
Yeah. So the first year is something that I've done 4 times now in my career. So if there's one thing I feel like I know how to talk about at this point, it's how to set yourself up for success and how to set your kids up for success that very first year. I guess the big thing you need to understand going into year one is that it's twice as much work as any other year at a school, but it's twice as important as any other year because you really set the tone for your career and your relationship with those kids at that school, which is probably the most important thing I can say today is that year one is almost always, no, not almost always about relationships with the kids first. That's
Mm.
that's the most important thing you can do in that first year. It doesn't matter what you teach, what your scores are, how well your marching band does that first season. It's always about building those relationships with those kids and the other stakeholders in your program as well.
We will get right back to our content, but I wanted to thank you for being such an amazing band director, that you're taking your time and listening to a band director podcast. There's many options out there, and I appreciate you very much taking in this content. I hope that you understand that your students are very lucky to have you as their band director, that you're continuing to grow, and that they are going to benefit from your improved skills as a band director. You can share this episode with any band director friends or other music education friends who can learn from this content, because good pedagogy is good pedagogy. And if you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com, and you'll be able to sign up on our Patreon platform to give at least $5 or $3 a month. And it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode. Yeah. So what's the balance? Because we're not just trying to get them to like us, right? Even though
Mhm.
that's a good thing, but
Right.
there is going to be some conflict. One of the things, so we put this out on the Facebook group, and the exact question we asked was, hold on, I have it here for you. What are some successful strategies everyone can share for the first year as a band director? And veteran teacher Ron responded and said, think long term, have a 5 year strategy. So
Yeah.
I remember thinking, like, I want all these kids to like me and I want to do the right thing. But when this program is closer to where I want it to be, none of them are actually going to be here. These
Right.
kids I'm with are the building blocks for the next thing. So how do you balance that? I want these kids right now to like me, but I also understand it's a long process.
Right. Yeah, so I think balance is the right word. The very first thing I always do going into year one, and it's really worked out for me, is I try to get in front of the kids as soon as possible before the year starts. I'm hired, I'm board approved. I've talked with my predecessor and my new administration. I want to try to set up a meeting with those students and their parents if possible before that school year ends. And that's not always possible for everybody, depending on like when you're hired in the process. Sometimes you're hired, I don't know. Like my first job, I was hired 2 weeks before band camp was supposed to start. So that
Yeah.
definitely was possible. But get in front of those kids as soon as possible. And the very first thing I try to do is I try to let them see who I am as a person and who I'm going to be as a teacher. To let them know that, I'm not coming in to completely change everything. And that's something I'm sure we'll talk about a lot with our time too. But the other thing you want to make sure they understand, and this is where that balance comes into play, is what your expectations are going to be, because they can't show up on the first day of school and surprise, this band director is way different than our last person was. They need to know what they're getting themselves, or what they're getting into going into a new year with a new band director. And there's a balance with that. You want to make sure that you're setting yourself up to it's not, I don't think it's important to be popular with the kids, but you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up to be able to have a good relationship with them, but you want to be fair to them too, and you want to be able to have a successful program, and you want to be able to teach. So one of the first things I do in that meeting is I talk about my expectations, my core beliefs for a band program, the things that make me tick, things like, and I'm sure, in the band world, especially in marching band, we've heard this before, to be early is to be on time, to be on time is to be late. That's something I live by. It's one of the first things I say to new students, whether it's a first year for me or not. When you get new freshmen in the door, it's the first thing they need to know. So, I guess the important thing for you before you have that meeting is to think about what are those important things for me that are my non-negotiables for year one going into a new program, and how can I best, get that message across to new students as soon as possible.
One of the things I've been able to do in the two times, it's been a while now because I've been in the same school for 18 years, but when I was
Wow.
in a new school twice, both times I took over a program where the year before that, I'll just say the bands didn't sound very
Mm.
good. There wasn't a lot of pride in what they were sounding like. And I got a lot of buy-in right away when the kids realized that they were starting to sound really good. Now, I was
Yep.
also nice to them, but the minute they go to a concert and their parents come back and they're like, "Oh my goodness, you sound like the Portland Symphony Orchestra." Well, of course we don't, but they're saying that, my kid sounds really good. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that's the end all and be all, but you get a lot of buy-in when you're in front of the band and they start to have musical success.
Right, right. And you alluded to it, but I think the other thing that's important to know, especially maybe for first year teachers that are coming out of a college program where they're surrounded with music majors and they're surrounded with professors that used to be band directors that are very, very proficient on their instruments. You're going into a situation where more than likely you're going to be the only person in the room that actually knows what it sounds like, or you're going to have the most knowledge of what it sounds like. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not to say you need to have low expectations because you always want to have high expectations for your kids and your program, but other people's definition, parents, administrators, your students' definition of success is going to be much lower than what you think it is. So you're exactly right. When you have that first concert, or you play at that first football game, or you have your parents and friends show at the end of band camp, and things sound even not necessarily even better, but just different, you're gonna start getting community buy-in right away.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So there's a great quote I wanted to use here, and we're gonna play this clip. This is from Bobby Lambert. I met with him
Mhm.
about 6 months ago, and sort of when he took over the Wando High School program from Scott Rush. This is one of the top programs in the country, and what he did when he walked into this program. So everybody, check this out.
I said, I have a few things I want to tell you today. Number one, I'll tell you, I'm Bobby Lambert. Here's where I'm from. Here's what I've done. None of that really matters. Here's what I really need you to know. Number one, I'm not as good as Scott Rush. I fully admit it. I know it. You don't have to wonder about it. So now I've already established I'm not as good as Scott Rush. However, Bobby Lambert, Laney Radicke, Jeff Handel, Michael Gray, Tim Cole, Sarah. Well, she got married. I just lost her name. Oh my gosh, Sarah Price. Thank you, Sarah Price. All these now. M. Holtz. I said all of us are better than any one band director ever thought about being, and Mr. Rush would agree. So we together are going to do this, but we need one more thing. I don't know the history and the traditions that you do. And so when I miss them, not if, but when I miss them, it's not intentional. And I need you to be strong enough to come to my office and say, hey, Mr. Lambert, this happened and we should have done it like this. I'll either answer with one of two ways. Number one, I hear you. I think we want to go in a slightly different direction, and here's why. I hope you can support that. Or number two, the answer will be, oh, crap. I'm so sorry. We'll fix it. How can we fix it? Help me fix it. So you have to take a more active role in our program than you may have with Mr. Rush to keep it as good as Mr. Rush made it.
Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. As a composer-led publisher, Excelsior Music Publishing provides new music of all levels for concert band, jazz ensemble, solo and ensemble, plus method books and resources. They're known for publishing inspiring, accessible music by composers who are sensitive to and passionate about educational aspirations of young musicians. Find your perfect back-to-school music at excelsiormusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com. One of the things I think is really important is so you're listening to your band your new band that you're there and they don't sound the way you want to, is like, I think you need to hide some of how you're actually feeling. Because
Yes.
if you come out and you just tell them they sound like junk, and if everything is like, this is all terrible, well, they're not going to buy into that at all. So they also will see through the whole, you sound amazing no matter what routine.
Yep.
So I think you need to be honest, but you also, you can't just be negative and you can't
Yep.
be overly positive. I think you need to kind of find that balance. Agree?
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially, and it goes back to knowing your situation before you walk in the door for the first day of school. Do as much research as you can, talk to your predecessor, find out, for yourself what the strengths and weaknesses are. Don't take everybody else's word for it. In the day of social media, you're at a much bigger advantage than, I think band directors were a while back. You can almost always find recent videos on YouTube or, Facebook or, even TikTok probably of that band playing. So kind of go in with some expectations of what you think you might hear, and go in with a little bit of a game plan of what you want to change and how you can package that. You're 100% right. Kids are going to see straight through the, oh man, you guys sound great no matter what, thing. But how you package that in the first year is really, really important, because you can come off as, and take it from somebody that did it their first year teaching straight out of college. If you come in with the whole, wow, that was really terrible, or maybe not that direct, but if you're constantly telling them what needs to be improved on, what needs to be improved on, this needs to be better, then they're not going to respond to that, and they're going to shut down. You're going to start losing kids in that first year. I A really common method that I think every band director uses is the compliment sandwich, right? What's something that went well, even if it wasn't perfect? Here's how we make that better, and if we are able to do that, then this is the results that we're going to see. So
It's funny. People use that compliment sandwich, but I think it's actually a criticism sandwich, because you don't
yeah,
say this is a bread sandwich. You say, you name what's in the middle, and what's in the middle is
yeah,
actually the criticism. So, and
yeah,
anyway, and I would say you're going to hear what they sound like the year before. When you hear them in the fall, they're going to sound worse, because every band
probably.
sounds worse at the beginning of the year and then gets better as you go. So I've
Oh yeah,
always found both times I did it that they sounded worse than I expected.
oh yeah,
That was just coming from college. One of the reasons I think I got the job I have now is because I listened to what they did, so I knew how many concerts they had. And when I applied for the job, it's probably too late because people listening to this already have a job. But when I applied for the job, I like set out a program that I was going to do my first year. Okay, they have
Mhm.
3 concerts. Okay, fine. I'm not even going to deal with changing that. Here's what I'm going to do in these first 3 concerts. So when I walked into the interview committee, I had like on nice card stock or whatever, here's the pieces we're going to do. And that really impressed the interview committee. Now, how many of those pieces did we actually do in that first year?
Yeah,
Zero. I wanted to, but it turns out it was a complete misread on my part. So that
yeah.
planning ahead, I think, is a really huge piece of it.
Yeah, you got to plan ahead. And I think you bring up something really, really important too. And it sort of alludes back to the Facebook comment that you talked about earlier. When you walk in to the interview, one, make sure you've done your research, but two, walk in with that 3 to 5 year plan. Even if it's even, and this will happen. I walked in my very first year, and I've walked in to every other first year that I've had with a 3 to 5 year plan. And it changes in the first 2 months that you're on that job, because you realize things when you're in the band room with the kids every day that you didn't know before you had the job. But it's really, really important that you have that plan, and you go into that first year with goals in mind for the end of that year and the end of the first 3 years and then the first 5 years. That way you're able to sort of keep yourself on track and get to where you want to go, even if you're making adjustments along the way.
My good friend Trent Austin started Austin Custom Brass so many years ago. You can call them at 816-410-0826. They ship all over the world. They have a shop in Kansas City, Missouri, and they really are an amazing sponsor of this podcast. They do trumpets, trombones, euphoniums, tubas, mouthpieces, and more, all the way from the beginner to the professional. Austin Custom Brass has worked with thousands of brass players from around the world. And you can check them out on www.austincustombrass.biz. Whether you're a student, a band director, a parent, or a player, Austin Custom Brass is your place to go for all your brass playing needs. Austin Custom Brass works with band programs from all over the country. They can provide a bid to you today. They can work within your school's budget, and they accept POs. Call their team today at 816-410-0826. Austin Custom Brass is an amazing resource for brass players and great humans, great people. You'll love working with them. Give them a call. One of the things I think is really important is the importance of having a mentor teacher. It's funny because somebody even mentioned on one of these comments, like, yeah, the local IT guy might be your mentor teacher, but that's not really your mentor teacher. You need someone who's an experienced band director, ideally in that area, but that you really trust. In fact, I want to kind of read from Brandon's response here. He says, find a veteran teacher close to you and keep them on speed dial. There's no way to know everything coming out of college. A veteran teacher within your district or region would be able to help with a lot of the logistics that you just don't know yet. Don't be afraid to ask questions. We're all here for each other. Every one of us has been through what you're going through right now.
Yep. And I think that's the one thing I wish I had really taken to heart my first year teaching. My first year teaching, a lot of people I think are fortunate in that they have a really strong student teaching experience. I wasn't one of those people. I had a really unique situation. And I was sort of that typical college music education major that, left college thinking I knew everything and that I was ready to take on the world. And, it didn't matter that I was taking over a really small program in rural South Georgia. We were going to be a BOA band in 3 years, darn it. And
Yep.
I think something that I wish I had done is taken a step back and say, okay, I need to, do that. I need to don't just have one mentor, have multiple mentors, have the person that your student taught with, have, somebody from, your undergraduate that you trust, have a local band director, have a community of resources available to you that you can get a strong pool of opinions from whenever you need it. And don't be afraid to ask.
They need to be your people, people that you can easily talk to. That's, they kind of think like you think, but they'll also challenge you as well. Yeah. The mentor piece is just enormous. And these days with Facebook, I mean, you and I started talking, it's like we know each other, and obviously we've never actually talked,
right.
But the ability to connect with people throughout the world is awesome.
Yeah. And one of my biggest mentors is, somebody, he gave me my first tech job when I was in college, and he writes my shows now, but his name's Jim Reed. He's from Tennessee. We live across the country from each other now, but he's literally on speed dial. I pick up and call him whenever I need him, any time of day. And, it's just important to have those resources. I think on the flip side of that, you talked a little bit about, making sure they're your people. The flip side of that is making sure they're also not yes men that are going to tell you you're doing a great job no matter what. You gotta have people that are in your corner that are going to tell you what you need to hear too. Like, because I call it getting ear blind. When you're in front of the band every day, you miss things that you don't hear every day. You need people that are gonna be able to tell you, like, well, have you heard this yet? You really need to spend some time working on long tones or intonation, or just an example. But yeah, find people that challenge you as an educator.
And that can be done by going to festival or going to contests. It can also be done by making a recording and sending it to one of your friends and saying, "What do you hear?" and all that.
Or sending it to a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah. So another big, I think, component for people is the growth mentality, just having that growth mindset, right? In fact, Jason mentioned on the Facebook page, be a sponge. Don't be the deadly. This is funny. That's why I want to read it. Don't be a deadly combination of young and very opinionated. When you think you know everything, there's no room for growth, right?
Yeah,
and I remember thinking that for sure. Like, nope, I can do this. We're going to be great. And then, I had to learn to work with other people.
Yeah, no, that was me. Yeah, and I think we all, it doesn't really matter how long you've been teaching. I think we all sort of get into that mindset sometimes of, no, I've got this. I know what I'm doing. But and I always say this going into year one too, learn before you teach. And it sort of goes back to, the listen before you talk or listen more than you talk mentality. Something I like to think about going into year one is when you walk into that band room, with the exception, if you're taking over a high school program, of maybe the freshmen that you're coming in with, you're going to know the least about that program in the room. Your seniors, juniors, and sophomores, and anybody else that's been a part of that school program longer than you is going to know more than you know. So be a learner first, be a sponge, soak up how they do things here before you go in and start trying to make changes.
100%. So you mentioned earlier about going in and having specific things that you wanted to change in each program. What are some pretty typical things that you found you were able to change pretty quickly and had success, like within the first 6 months, like,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, so I think it entirely depends on your situation walking, and that goes back to the know the situation before you walk in and before you sign the contract. Do your research, talk to people that have been a part of that program or been around that program for a long time. Talk to parents if you can, and do a lot of talking with your predecessor. Somebody several years ago, somewhere out there, shared this table that I really loved, and I wish I could find it again. But I basically it was like a cheat sheet for band directors entering their first year with the program,
Awesome.
and it was something along the lines of if you're replacing a strong band director and a popular band director, change nothing your first year. If you're replacing a strong but unpopular director, change only what's necessary. If you're replacing a weak director who is really popular with the kids or the community, still only change what's absolutely necessary. And then, the least likely scenario, if you're replacing a weak director who is also really unpopular, change what the kids will allow you to change. And I've been in a few different types of those situations. I think I've been in the replacing a really strong and popular band director, in which case you change absolutely nothing unless you absolutely have to. You try to follow what they've done in the past that first year. Now, given like you're gonna have your preferences, like something easy to this sort of change is maybe you have a really specific warm up routine that you want to follow, or you use something really specific out of a really specific method book that they're not planning or that they haven't used in the past. Things like that are easy to implement. But then the flip side of that, and I've gotten to do this once, and it was probably the easiest first year I've ever had, is I replaced somebody that the kids didn't really have a strong connection to or a really strong opinion of. Um, and it was totally different than how every other first year generally goes. Because generally, you want to sort of tiptoe because it's really not your program that first year. But those kids were really hungry and ready for change. And I was able to sort of, talk with the kids and get a lot of opinions about how things have been done in the past. How do we feel about those things? What would you like to see by the time you graduate from this program? And really sort of make changes based off of that. And that year it was everything from how we operate in the stands at football games, the type of competitions we go to the standards of the concert band, how we do concerts. I mean, they were just ready for change. So you really have to know your situation.
I love that. To me, one of the biggest things when you come in, especially if the program, I mean, I guess in my situation, I've noticed a lot of people replacing programs and the program going into a program and the program isn't very strong. So I guess this might not work if you're entering a very strong program already. But assuming you're not, the biggest thing that I would recommend is attention to detail. Like eventually you want the band to be very attentive to detail musically. So start with the most basic things, right?
Yeah.
And I pulled this from John Wooden, the great basketball coach. And if anybody's looking for an easy read on leadership and teaching, it's just titled Wooden, his last name, short book. I hate to read, but I could read it. So the attention to detail, like, okay, the first day of band, this is how we enter the room. This is where you put your bags. This is how you put your stand. I have a riser. I have risers in my band room, the built-in risers, which I dislike, but I have nothing. I can't do anything about it. So one of the first things I did was I insisted they put their music stand on the level below them because they always had it on the same level. I could see the first rehearsal, it was on the same level, and they were all like really hunched in and they couldn't sit up and they couldn't breathe well and all that. So, I had some kids fighting me that first year, but pretty soon that was an easy no-brainer. And it just attention to detail. I'll use a John Wooden thing. So John Wooden, I forget what it is. Did they win like 13 national championships in 15 years or something like ridiculous at UCLA? Anyway, they would win the national championship in March. And then in August or whatever, whenever they would go back to their first practice, do you know what the first thing he did with the national champion UCLA Bruins basketball team? The first thing he would do is teach them how to put their socks on correctly. He said, you have to put it on. He said, you put it on starting at the toe, and then you pull it up tightly to the heel, roll it all the way up, pull it all the way up, and then roll it down to where you want. He said, this might seem silly, but the reasoning was because if you put your socks on haphazardly and you have a wrinkle, you're going to get what do you call it? Not a bruise, but like a sore on your foot. And then you won't be able to play to your best.
Yeah.
Right. So
I
it's
love
like
that.
the simple things lead to the more important things. So if you can combine a bunch of simple things and how you want your kids, like insisting they have a pencil,
Yeah.
something, okay, no, get up and get a pencil. No, like the basic things, you start stacking those things, it gives you momentum, and that will help turn the program around.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I got into a similar situation actually. I took over a 5 through 12 job. So I was teaching middle school and high school at one point, and uh, I had middle schoolers. And their predecessor had told them, and this was just his preference. I'm not here to argue, which is right, which is wrong. But if you ever need to put your instrument down to leave to like go to the restroom or get water, you just set it in your chair and you go do what you need to do. My preference is always on the floor under the seat because if it's on the floor, it can't fall any further.
Mm-hmm.
And I had kids that really fought me on that, and it was, well, Mr. Munoz, had us do this, and I was like, well, I understand that, and I understand that's what we did last year, but here's why I want to make these changes. And I think that's important too. It doesn't matter how small of a change you want to make, even if it's just, I'm going to insist that you have a pencil, or I'm going to insist that, your music stand is on the floor below you instead of on the same floor, same, level as you on the riser. Explain why and explain your reasoning. That way it's not just, well, because I'm the band director now and because I said so, because that's how kids assume things go until you're able to sort of explain, this is the rationale behind it. And really, with, just to go back to the instrument on the chair example, really it only took the first two kids, knocking an instrument off the chair onto the floor for people to be like, oh, okay, that's why they go on the floor instead of the chair. Um, so yeah, and I think the other thing to remember, especially maybe for like first year fresh out of college teachers, is it doesn't matter how small of a change you try to make that first year, you're gonna get pushback from it. It doesn't matter if it's just, well, our last band director let us have our book bag at our seat during rehearsal. Well, I'm gonna insist that you put it against the wall when you come in and then you come into the setup. Um, you're going to get pushback, and it's really, really important that you not buckle if it's something that's important to you, if it's a non-negotiable, if it's a core value for what your program is going to be, or if it's going to inhibit you getting to those core values. I stay the course, and eventually, first 2 months maybe, you won't hear about it anymore.
I also think it's important to know that where the kids are coming from as well. Like
Mhm.
they're 17 years old. They've been in this band program for 7, 8 years. And all of a sudden now they get stuck with a new teacher in their senior year. And they view, because they in their education, what you're doing is different, is not
Yeah.
correct in their viewpoint. So obviously you're the professional, they're not. But I think it also goes a long way, like not holding things against them,
Mhm.
because like they're trying to act in what they think is the best. Of course, their brains are not fully formed yet, but they're thinking about what is best for my band right now, and they're trying to kind of fight for that sort of in their own way.
Absolutely. I think something that's important, I've talked with other band directors that have been doing this a lot longer than me about, their strategy and their approach in a year one. And a lot of people seem to have the mindset like, and this is specific for high school really, but if you're going into a new high school program, your program is really your freshmen and your sophomores, maybe really. So those are the ones that you spend all your energy on. Those are the ones that, you really invest in, because, your seniors, they're super bought into the last person, and you're going to have a harder time winning them over. I tend to disagree with that because of what you just said, because you're going to inherit seniors that have been in that program for a long time. If it's, a situation like what I was in, they have been in that same band program with that same director since they were in fifth grade. So they're what, eighth year in the program now. And the younger students in that program look up to those kids. So you need to, yeah, yes, you're only going to have them for a year, but you need to spend just as much energy as getting them on board and getting them bought in as you do your freshmen and your fifth graders if you're in that situation, because they're going to be your leaders. And then past that, those kids deserve to have a good last year of band, whether, it's a new face in the band room or not.
One of the most important things besides your personality and how you are as a teacher, I think, is the programming that you select. The music that you choose to do with them goes everywhere. I mean, if it's overprogrammed, it's a problem. If it's underprogrammed, if it's a problem. If they think it's too easy, it's a problem. I mean, all these things. And I do want to read from great master teacher from Florida, Don Zentz wrote, and this is the last one we're going to use here. And Don's now on the Midwest board, I think on the jazz side of things. So Don has seen it all. And he says, our curriculum is rooted in the literature we select. Analyze very carefully where the band is at currently. Select music that will stretch them, but not snap them. You only grow when you're stretched, but we don't jump into calculus without being able to do algebra, or algebra without a strong foundation on multiplication and division. Seems like common sense, but far too many first-year teachers try to pursue the music they just played in college because that's what they know. And we've all been there. Learn the full spectrum of band repertoire inside out and backwards.
Yeah. And, be ready to study that first year too. If you're taking over a situation, perfect example. The program I just took over at Cienega, their top concert ensemble was playing at a higher grade level than what I was used to working at with high schoolers. So that this first year, I really had to do a lot of extra homework to make sure I brushed up on my chops in the grade 4, grade 5 area too. But then going back to the general idea of this, I would almost argue that it's more detrimental to underprogram and insult the kids than it is to overprogram. And people might disagree with that, but it's really, really insulting when you come in and they were playing, grade 4 music with the last guy, and maybe it wasn't great, but they were playing it, and to their knowledge, it was going back to the bar of success thing. In their mind, it was successful. If you come in and you say, no, we can't handle that for whatever reason, here's a grade 2. Kids are going to be really, really insulted by that. And maybe that's what's best for your program. Maybe you're in a situation where that previous band director left and a lot of seniors graduated, and you got, a very young band coming up, or, maybe the ability level's just gone down, COVID happens, whatever. Maybe you do need to take a step back in that first year with those kids, but how you package that is really, really important. And we talk about differentiation in the classroom a lot. And I think, that's a really strong opportunity for band directors right there. If you've got seniors that are used to handling this upper repertoire and that the rest of the band can't handle that, find something to enrich what those seniors are doing that year. Put them in small ensembles that meet during lunch or after school, and give them chamber ensemble music to work on. Send them to solo and ensemble if your state does that. Just find ways to keep them engaged, or you're gonna lose those seniors.
So, Reed, going back to the Bobby Lambert clip that we listened to, he sort of puts the glory on everybody else around him, the previous director, Scott Rush, and all the people who he taught with on the team. What are some specifics of the things that you do in this first meeting?
Yeah, so I love that Bobby Lambert clip because I think it summarizes exactly how an initial meeting with your band should go. And I love that he talks about the predecessor so much in that situation, because I think it's really, really important that not just for that initial meeting, but your entire first year and really your first 3 years, that your kids should not know your opinions on your predecessor, whether you were best friends with them or you have a really low opinion. They should only hear positive things from you from the last guy, because they only know positive things generally about the last guy. But one of the things I always lead that meeting with is, I just sort of tell them who I am, where I've been, and why I love band so much and why I'm passionate about it. But then when I really start to get into it, one of the first things I always say, and I'll use my most recent predecessor as an example. I hope he doesn't mind, but his name was Grant Knox. And one of the first things I told my students when I took over at Cienega is, listen, I'm not Grant Knox, I'm not Mr. Knox, and it doesn't matter if I stand up here for the entire next year and do everything exactly how Mr. Knox did it and exactly how Mr. Knox said it. It's going to be different because I'm not Mr. Knox, and I need you to understand that I don't mean that personally. I'm not here to completely change, what you did with him and what you love about band. I'm here because I love band too. But I need you to know that at some point, things are probably going to feel a little bit different because I'm not Mr. Knox, and I need you to be able to come to me. Just like Bobby said, I need you to be able to come to me and say, hey, some people are feeling this way or I'm feeling this way because usually we do things like this and now things are a little bit different. And I promise you, if I've done anything differently, it's not intentional. It's not because I hate the way you've done it before. I just need to know. And it goes back to, you know the least about that band program in the room. Your juniors and seniors know more about that band program than you do, and you got to be willing to listen to them. So that's the most important part of that initial meeting. Some other things I go over, I talked about this in the beginning, but you need to set your expectations. They don't only need to know what you're passionate about and what you love about band, but they need to know what makes you tick and what's going to make your program tick and what you expect of them at band camp and past that. Some other things I always try to do. I went and got my bachelor's at Troy University in Alabama, and there was a longtime band director there that founded that band program, and he had a quote. His name is Johnny Long, that everybody in Troy seems to live by, and it's band is not spelled B-A-N-D. Band is always spelled F-U-N. And that's one of the first things I share with students is that I'm there because I want them to have fun. And if they ever start to feel like it's not fun being in band, I need them to come and tell me because we need to figure out what it is we need to change to make sure that they are having fun. Now, that's not to say fun's the only important thing because, you've got to teach, you've got to make music, and they need to get fundamentally better, but you want them to enjoy being there. And I really want them to leave that first meeting with a calmer sense of, okay, this guy's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay this year with him because he cares about us and he cares about us having fun. Because that's what kids care about when it comes down to it.
And I think that's really important because band is optional.
Yes.
If you don't keep them, you don't have a job, you don't have a band.
Correct. Yeah.
So Reed, I kind of want to close it here with some practical pieces that you've used either in your first year or at the high school level that people may or may not know, and then we may even throw a recording in or two of pieces. I want to throw in a couple that I really like, sort of how I've used them. So if you planned on either one of these, you can't have them. They're mine. First one is American River Songs, Pierre LaPlante, which I know a lot of people know that piece. It's just fabulous. You can use it as a third tune on a 3-set program. You can use it as a first tune. It's the gift that keeps on giving, as one of my mentors would say. And you can teach that piece for 6 months or 6 weeks, and there's always more to do. The other piece that I love to do in this situation as well is the Bach Prelude and Fugue in B flat major by arranged by Mollman. And I'll tell you this, Bach's not alive anymore. I don't even do the repeats sometimes. Like the band, if they can't even handle let's just not do these repeats, and they feel like they won something. But you can make a band sound fantastic with that piece, and it's a piece that is actually not very hard. It's like a solid grade lower 3, but it feels like a harder piece to a lot of kids. So that's a piece I've used with really good high level players to get them to play something easier, but they didn't really know it. those are two of my standbys. So what are some that you like?
Yeah, no, American River Songs is always a go-to for me. Also, I actually did it my first year at Cienega with my students for MPA or assessment. Um, I don't necessarily have a set of like compositions that are pieces that I go to every year. I think it's really, really important to have pieces that you know really, really well that you can pull out like that in a year one though, because you're not going to know your musicians as well as you might if you've been with them for a few years. So you need to sort of have your go-tos that you can be like, oh, I know this piece really well and it'll work for this because I know how to teach it really fast. A composer though that I think is really accessible and he writes from a wide range, so you can use him all the way from like beginning middle school level up through like really the middle of high school level repertoire. Is Randall Standridge. I know he gets a lot of credit right now, but it's because he's writing a lot of really really good stuff. I've in a year one I've done a specific march that he's written, Darklands March, which is like a 2.5 I think, but I've done that as like a first like here's my go-to piece with like a lower level high school group twice now because I know how to teach it really well. It's different than a traditional march, so it gets the kids immediately like, oh, this is different. I really want to pay attention to this. And it's something that I have found every section of the band enjoys playing. And those are three really important things to me. So, the repertoire you pick is going to make or break whether or not you win kids over also. Because if you pick good repertoire, they're going to be more interested in what you're saying. So when you pick things like Darklands March, that's a lot of fun. That gives everybody in the band something to be engaged in. That's going to win more kids over right there. Another piece that I've done in year one, and again, this is like a lower level high school piece, upper level middle school piece maybe. It's Roland Barrett's
Arabian Dances.
Arabian Dances. Yep. It's really, really achievable. It's really, really interesting because you've got there's body percussion and you've got like optional vocals, really, really fun lines. Percussion's got some fun stuff in there. And it's just one of those pieces that every kid loves.
Beautiful. I love it. Reed, if people want to reach out to you and connect more, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I'm constantly on social media. You can find me on Facebook pretty easily, Reed Bailey. Other than that, my email address, if you want to reach me, and I'll preface this with I love helping other band directors. I think one of the things that's so special about this field is we're a community and we don't have secrets. Everybody's always willing to help each other. And I really, really, really love talking about year one. That's why I love this topic so much. So if you want to email me, my email is baileyr@valeschooldistrict.org. Yeah, I'm always willing to help. Please reach out. And yeah, thanks, Kyle.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.